He's been 20 years designing and building multidisciplinary, community-informed, patient-centered healthcare programs. And I love the interdisciplinary sort of development of this team because he will be partnering with Manav Shankar Sinha, who is an economist and team lead for analytics at the Lowell Community Health Center, data-driven, and especially looking at initiatives supporting refugee populations. Gentlemen, welcome from Boston. Come on up.
Hello, everyone. This is Manav. You nailed the name. It's a tough name. Okay, let's see. So this is, I'm just going to keep it short so that we finish up in time. I'm Manav, and as Horst said, I'm an economist, and I lead the analytics at Lowell Community Health Center. I'm also an MPH in epidemiology candidate at THN School of Public Health, where I specialize in psychosocial and life course epidemiology. And with me, I have Rob, who doesn't need any introduction, but I'll still pass on the mic to him so that he can take over.
Good morning. So I wanted to give a little background first on the center where the data that we're presenting is based from. So I'm a primary care internist by training, also a health policy person from public health. And we're reporting on the data from the Mehta Health Center. So Mehta, you'll see the trend of talking about Khmer history today. And Mehta is a Pali term that means loving kindness. And this name was given by one of the leading monks in Lowell when the center was founded. So Mehta is a specialty center within a larger community health center. Those of you in the US might be aware of federally qualified health centers. So Lowell was one of those first or second wave community health centers after the founding of the movement by Jack Geiger that opened and served low-income folks in Lowell for many years, doing great work. And then 1980 happened, and we passed the Refugee Act. And the landscape in Lowell changed very significantly, where we soon had one of the largest Southeast Asian refugee populations relocated to the area. And the important thing to know about the Mehta Health Center is it was developed, built, and staffed by the community. It was not something that was either imposed or granted by anyone else. It was demanded by the refugee community, the forced migrant community, and they wanted to build it on their own terms. So that is a little bit of the background, and just to understand that the Mehta Health Center is one department within this larger federally qualified health center. Mehta operates as a combined primary care and mental health services center. So we usually say it provides care, birth to death, and everything in between. Who are patients there? So for many years, Mehta has been a site for, in Massachusetts, we have a robust refugee resettlement program. And what the Southeast Asian community learned, especially the Khmer community, in building the center, they then spread and took in the Iraqis as they came. And they took in people from Central America and people from DRC and eventually Afghans and also Haitians. And the key is at every subsequent wave, not only did those folks become patients, but they became staff. So every time a new population arrived, immediately let's hire from that community so people recognize the needs of that community. So Mehta naturally had a large number of torture survivors. The majority of patients there are either first generation or second generation. But one of the ideas was, how do we get other patients in? How do we help people within the larger health center, the larger city healthcare network, get patients in, torture survivors and others who need specialty care? So what you'll see on the right side of your screen is just a very poor way of trying to get non-clinical staff to understand who we might want to see in the center. You know, there's no good way to recognize people who are torture survivors until they tell us their history. But we came up with this as just a very blunt instrument for someone in registration or someone within the insurance office to say, oh, I see that you speak Kurdish. You might benefit from being within this program. And they don't have to explain much. So that's one way. And you'll see how this plays into the data that Manav is going to present. So we are also, Meta is one of 2 sites in Massachusetts and one of 35 in the network of SOT sites from ORR. And the period in question that we're going to be reviewing, Meta served approximately 7,600 patients. That's over a 2-year period. Just to contextualize it, the city of Lowell has a population of roughly 110, 120,000 people. The larger healthcare center cares for about 1/3 of the city. So about 1/3 of this population of mostly or especially refugee and torture survivor population coming through our doors at some point.
I'm just going to quickly overview the program from the health center perspective. And, oh, I see the monitor there as well. So we, firstly, as part of the program, we do clinical identification. So this is conducted during initial primary care visit. Then there is also social history documentation for the people in the program, and also just as a meta workflow. Then we also identify them as primary survivors of torture or secondary survivors of torture. We also have mental health screening that is done. In addition, we have behavioral health referrals, as Rob pointed out. Like our health center has both primary care and behavioral health under the Meta Health Center. One thing special we have, as Rob also pointed out, is like community members acting as patient navigators. So if you're thinking about Khmer refugees, we have patient navigators who serve in that language, who's helping patients navigate. So we did health services research, and we especially want to evaluate the impact of the SOT program, primarily the data collection that is a part of the SOT guidelines on reporting. And we also want to examine the role of patient navigators and richer social context in referrals and influencing post-referral behavior. So we do expect like the program participants would have higher referrals, higher scheduling post-referrals, and higher completion of visits post-referrals as well. And this is all because of the program, but also like something we call building social capital by the patient navigators. This is just a brief study design of the participants. So we start at the top, which is 65,000 total patient population served at LCHC in that 2-year period. And as Rob pointed out, the city in itself has 110,000. So in that 2 years, we touched almost 65,000 patients as part of the Lowell Community Health Center. Amongst that, we have 3 groups. Firstly, we had the intervention group, which is the SOT program patients. And we see a sample size of 387. Then we have eligible patients who could not be enrolled in the program because of limited funds. Those were identified using country of origin, language, and religion, and also insurance status being HSN. The additional logic was using social documentation history, which is also a special thing that we at Lowell document. The third group is patients who are victims of torture, but they are not a part of the Meta Health Center, so they are called non-SOT, non-Meta Health Center patients. And we removed all the patients who were under 18 and those who had prior BHS visits, behavioral health services visits. This is just a slide, just sort of like capturing the exposure once again and the covariates we sort of used and the outcomes, which is primary outcome of being a referral. It's a dichotomous variable of yes and no. Secondary outcome of at least one behavioral health visit schedule. Again, binary outcome, yes and no. And last, tertiary outcome of visit completion. So this captures the three gradients, what happens at the clinic, and not just like a referral, but what happens after a referral as well. We had a little bit of missing data in terms of ethnicity, so does every clinic. Sometimes the registration fails to enter the data. So for those, we have used the golden standard, which is MICE, multiple imputations using chained equations, to sort of create 17 imputated data sets so that we don't lose power in our sample and we don't remove cases because of lack of this data. And we conducted multinomial logistic regression model, and all of this analysis was done in Stata. This is just sort of like a description which captures a lot of the things we saw in the data, and we can see like amongst the SOT group, the referrals was 23.27, the schedule rate was 15%, and completed 13%. And as we can see, comparing this to the other groups, the program participants had a very high referral, scheduled, and completed rate. So this is just a descriptive statistic, not even a, yeah. I'm just gonna pass along quick because we have a lot of slides to cover, so. In this one, we just present the data in a different form, which is what happens to patients, like in terms of was there no utilization, scheduled but not completed, scheduled and completed. So a general rule here is larger the green area, that's bad. So we can see for other departments, this was a higher green area, so there was no utilization. That means there was no referral done. And as we go along the gradient, meta department, but not a part of the program, had 40.28 green, and the SOT program participant had 35.14% here. This is just a table one for our research, and on average, the SOT group was more likely to be Asian, non-Hispanic, males, Khmer, and other language speakers. And this is in part what Rob was talking about initially, like how we use that document to categorize patients into mental health center, but there are still spillovers. So like there can be patients who just come to the health center. They are not referred to the specialty care. So most of them are Hispanic in nature because they might have had some relatives coming to the health center, so they want to be seen with the same doctor, but they don't get referred to the specialty clinic. So that is being captured in the table one. This is the finding, and this is gonna surprise a lot of people. Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But in terms of just the referral, which was the primary outcome, the SOT program participants had an odds ratio of 3.58, which is 2.5 times, almost 2.5 times higher referral rate than compared to the reference group, which is non-SOT, non-meta, so other departments. Amongst the primary referral, we see the non-SOT meta odds ratio being 1.33, and it is barely not significant. So there is no structural difference between non-SOT meta and non-SOT non-meta. I know these are confusing words, but I hope people are able to follow up. The most astounding finding was in the tertiary, which is the visit completion. For the SOT participants, the odds ratio was 5.59, which means program participants were 4.59 times likely, or had a 459% more rate of completing the visit. Yeah, 415, oh, that's a huge number, right? So this is, we have a very wide confidence interval because the number of people in this participation group was kind of low. So because there was a lot of attrition once a referral was made, then a visit was scheduled, and then a visit was completed. That's why we have a very wide confidence interval. Rest assured, we abided by the rules for including the covariates, and we also did a Bonferroni correction for multiple testing because it's a multinomial logistic regression model, and even after that, these findings were significant. I just want to say a few words before I hand it over to Rob again. This is not a causal inference because, as you can see, we did not have a lot of data to begin with, like the types of torture or any other clinical covariates. But we assume those to be non-differential because when we designed the study, it was not considered. So those effects could be in any direction, but mostly non-differential. They played no part in selecting patients who would be a part of the program. And now I'll hand it over to Rob to discuss the findings.
So in many ways, that's a complicated way of saying what we all know about the ORR SOT program. It benefits patients, right? And I think what we're trying to point out here is that it benefits patients within the program. How do we find more patients? So I think the most important takeaway for me as a medical educator, as a clinician, is how do we train people to conduct a comprehensive migration and trauma history for people who have not already been identified as torture survivors, right? It's very complicated. Any of you in an EMR, and I'm going to assume that's anyone with any credential, know that social history is a throwaway term for people who build EMRs. We struggled for years to get social history recognized as something meaningful. So now in any EMR you're in, you can check off whether they use alcohol or some other substance, and that counts as social history. But that's not enough for this population, I'd say for any population. So most SOT programs are great at gaining this history. And what we need to do is universalize this kind of practice to all trainees, all practitioners, so they understand how to get the history in a meaningful way, and then have some way to document it. Again, by gaining this history, we are able to reach people and identify people who need to be seen in mental health services. And I'll just give an extreme example from the population in the study. There are people who might have been here for 40 years, torture survivors. And everyone knows that if you're in Meta, you're likely to be a torture survivor. If you're from X population, X community, you're likely to be a torture survivor. But maybe the clinicians who cared for them for many years never knew how to really screen. So it was not unusual for us to identify people who were 80 years old, who've been in the US for 40 years, who never had anyone ask them any questions about their trauma history. And guess what? They never offered it before because no one asked. And as we like to say, no one walks in with a sign that says, I'm a torture survivor. But a brief, respectful history gives people the power to say, I need help. I've been suffering. So we found a lot of elderly especially, and younger folks too, who had just never been identified and were able to be referred. So again, this is an equity issue. For one thing, we should be screening everyone. We shouldn't have any idea in our head like, this is probably someone who needs to be screened. That's what screening is. You screen everyone. And I can't speak enough about the role of the patient navigators in this program and in this study. And many of you, this is just a specified version of community health workers, which whether you work in the US or outside, you're probably familiar with. They're not as robustly recognized in the US, but they're starting to be. And we've made ample use in Meta and in this study, in the SOT program, of community health workers. And the key for why they're able to get these high rates of people to to mental health visits and completing mental health visits and into care, ongoing care, is because in many cases they are torture survivors themselves. And that kind of connection for patients is invaluable. I can tell a patient, I think you would benefit from psychotherapy, but they will then go ask the patient navigator, the community health worker, what do you think of it? That's what he said. And the community health worker is the one that they're going to see week in and week out in the community, in the clinic. I maybe saw them twice or 3 times a year, but that resource is really the force that brings them back and engages them in care. So, what do we want to take away from this? Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. So, I think this is an opportunity to build on what NCTTP is already doing, the idea of gathering data and using data to show the power of this program. And we want to support a community of professionals who use data in evidence-informed practices. And for many physicians, especially and others, psychologists, many others with data training, you have to show them data. We can tell people the benefits for the patients are this, and anecdotally. But when you can show people data, oftentimes that's more convincing, or convincing in the context of also giving them stories. So the other thing that we need to push for is having community health workers, patient navigators, as essential elements in this work, and I would say in healthcare in general in the US. They're the first to be cut when economies fall. They are not reimbursable for most of their work. So for any of you who are in a position to advocate, there are some states that are doing it. Community health workers should be reimbursable for their work. So I'm going to stop there. We have maybe 2 minutes for questions, I think, if anyone has any for me or Manav.
And I'm sorry, like we had to rush a few slides, but there were 2 slides sort of discussing the limitations and the future, which Rob summarized at the end, but we just wanted to take questions as well.
Hello, hopefully everyone can hear me. This is Amy Camel sharing a question from the chat. Someone was wondering if Meta offers virtual mental health sessions. And then something I might tack on to that is just a question about how do you deal with digital literacy issues if you do?
Yes, Meta does, or at least until recently has offered virtual visits. And that's one way that community health workers can assist with folks who have limited digital literacy to help engage them. But it is a challenge, especially for elderly torture survivors, to be able to manage video visits. But often we engage other community members or family members to assist them.
Just adding on to it a little bit, we also use big language interpreters, and we also are delving into AI, but specifically for Khmer speaking population. So we are seeing a lot of success, but it's still in a pilot phase because of everything is now becoming AI, and we are trying to save money, but we have made it very clear, like we want certain languages to be available for our patients now, and time will tell what's the adoption for those.
Somewhat related to that. You mentioned that you use patient navigators who are also community members for the client care. Do those patient navigators, do they act as interpreters at your medical center? And also, do you have in-house interpreters with a specific role for interpreting certain languages? And also, are you on the way of replacing interpreters with AI?
So in the past, there was some role for community health workers to act as interpreters, especially in the mental health space. But because of funding and other issues, they don't provide that currently. So most interpretation, the vast majority of interpretation has gone to phone in the larger health center. In Meta, we still have 2 in-person interpreters. We try to focus on Khmer and other primary languages, but it's waning, and it will go away because of the cost. We are not, Meta is not moving towards AI for interpretation, but someday everyone will, unfortunately, and it's the pressure that people are feeling, but not right now.
I just wanted to add, like, in-house interpreters are still preferred. It's just that the big language interpreters, which is not AI, but it was being used, they are very costly, and we get a monthly bill of almost like 100,000 for a community health center for all the languages per se. They offer all the language support, but they are very costly. So our priority is still like preserving all the in-house interpreters and then move towards AI to replace the big language ones. Big language is just connecting to a different company for interpreters because we don't have the capacity sometimes inside the health center to support all the other languages. And we have a lot of languages to support.
Thank you. Manav and I are around if you have other questions, but we want to let others move on.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. You know, when you hear the conclusions, the observations and where we're moving with this, for some of us in this audience, it might seem almost like common sense, like, yes, people from the community, these navigators, all this works. We seem to live in this realm of practice-based evidence. And it's so exciting to me to see the painstaking, detailed work to turn it into evidence-based practice that gives us that real sort of standing when we're facing funders or whomever it might be. So thank you so very much for engaging in that work.